Hello everyone, welcome to Sailors Creek Battlefield Historical State Park. This is the site of the last major fight of the war in Virginia. It takes place on April 6, 1865, and it's just 3 days before the surrender at Appomattox. My name is Ranger Lee Wilcox, and today, as part of our Rocking Chair Reflections series of programs, we're going to focus on Civil War uniforms and just what exactly is going on with those uniforms. And what I mean by that is that just the simple appearance of a soldier in uniform, without saying a word, a lot is being said just by the presence of that uniform. Case in point, this outfit that I'm wearing, which I'll go into detail further, but it's telling you things without me even saying something about them. For example, the symbols on the collar, this ornate design on the sleeves, the buttons, the number of buttons that I'm wearing, and even this kepi with the intricate design on the hat. Indicates something about this individual that I'm portraying from the Civil War. Now, before we dive into the details, and hopefully by the end of this program, we'll have created a battlefield detective out of you, in that whether you're looking at a picture book, a photo album, or even a painting, without reading the caption, you'll be able to determine within seconds what exactly is going on in that image, simply based off of the uniform and the symbols on that uniform the soldier's wearing. So just like today's modern-day athletes and the uniforms they wear, you can always tell whether it's a home team or if they're a away team based on the color. Your law enforcement, whether you're in scouting, even your park rangers, their uniforms indicate something about their job and where their rank structure is. And so with that, I need to introduce you to the three major branches of the military that were equally represented on both sides of the war, that is the Federal Army as well as the Confederate Army. And those branches of service are the infantry, the artillery, and the cavalry. Each branch had their own symbol, and they also had their own shade of color. And depending on what they were wearing on their uniform, it gave them away as to where they belonged. What I'm referring to here, like on this color chart, is, for example, at the top, the infantry symbol was the hunting horn. And today's modern military has been replaced with crossed rifles. But during the Civil War, it was the hunting horn, and the color for infantry was light blue. Artillery had crossed cannons, and their shade of color identifier was red. And then the cavalry was crossed sabers, and their color identifier was yellow. Now, when I'm referring to those colors is somewhere on the uniform there was the color that indicated the branch of service, whether it was the collar, the cuffs of the sleeves, or even the rank insignia would indicate what I'm talking about as far as the branch of service. Now, when we get into the individual ranks, and we'll start off with the non-commissioned officer ranks, and they were also shared by both sides universally, the symbols, that is, for the rank. We're talking about the NCOs, non-commissioned officers. These are your corporals and your various grades of sergeant. So on this chart, what I have here, on this side is your modern day military, and on this side is the Civil War era. Now, what we have are symbol-wise is what we're talking about here are chevrons, and that's the angled, pointed symbol. The round part is referred to as an arc. Now, you can tell, even though they're different in the way, the direction they're pointing, the Civil War era and the modern day era are very similar. So at the bottom, the corporal has 2 stripes, just like the modern military. A sergeant has 3 stripes, and the modern day military has 3 stripes. Again, these are also called chevrons. The first sergeant, you can see it has 3 chevrons with a diamond in the middle. The modern military has 3 chevrons, a diamond in the middle, but also has 3 arcs. At the top here, this is where it gets a little different from modern versus Civil War. This today, it would be represented as a master sergeant, and that's today's military. But in the Civil War, this particular design pattern, the 3 stripes and the 3 arcs, represented a sergeant major. Today's modern military, the sergeant major has the 3 chevrons, the 3 arcs, but a star in the center for a sergeant major. So Sergeant Major Civil War, Sergeant Major Modern Military. Now, depending on the branch of service you are in, on your uniform, whether you're a Confederate or Federal Union soldier, if you were, say, a corporal in the Confederate Army and you represented the infantry, this sergeant stripe, or I'm sorry, this corporal stripe here would represent the shade of blue. If you were in the artillery, let's say you were a first sergeant in artillery, this indicated rank here, it would be red in color. And if you were in the cavalry, say for example this sergeant's stripe, you're a cavalry sergeant, it would be yellow, just like it is in this example. So that's one way of determining your branch of service in the military back in the Civil War. Now moving on, we're going to get into the officer ranks, and this is where the two sides split apart in their symbology. Now for the most part, the Federal Union Army, the symbols that they use are still used today with very little difference, very little change. And the example here is this information, this little board here. It indicates the first three officer ranks. And what we have are second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and captain. At the bottom, the lowest grade of an officer is a second lieutenant. Now this is the Civil War era, and this is the modern military era. So during the Civil War, a second lieutenant had what we called a shoulder strap. This was the rank insignia that they wore on their shoulder. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a little bit. But you can tell here during the Civil War, all it was the rectangle. There was no symbol inside that rectangular field. But the modern day military, it's indicated the second lieutenant rank as a gold bar, sometimes referred to as a butter bar. Then you move up to the rank of first lieutenant, and that's a single bar on the shoulder strap during the Civil War. And in the modern military, it's still a single bar like the second lieutenant, but the first lieutenant color is silver. Then you get up into the rank of captain, and just like the Civil War and then modern day, the captain's rank is represented by 2 bars. In the Civil War here, it's on the shoulder strap, and in the modern military, it's 2 silver bars that represent a captain. Now going back to that branch of service, just like the sergeant stripes, so the non-commissioned officer stripes having a color code, if they were red, it was artillery, blue, it was infantry, and yellow, it was cavalry. The same was with these shoulder straps. So if this second lieutenant was in the artillery, instead of it having a blue field like it does here, it would be red. If it was cavalry, it would be yellow. So that's where the color coding comes into play as well. Now the next series of officer ranks for the Federal Union Army are these guys. And at the bottom, you have the major, lieutenant colonel, and then the colonel. Here again, the shoulder straps from the Civil War and the modern military. All right. On the major's rank, they were indicated by the symbol of a gold oak leaf. Lieutenant colonel, same as today, a silver oak leaf. And then when you get into the colonel rank, it's represented by an eagle. Next up are the generals. And what we're talking about are the stars, the symbol of the stars on an officer's uniform. Those are your general ranks. And each one has its own denomination or indicator. So with a single star, that is what we call a brigadier general. And it's generally somebody, no pun intended, someone that's in charge of a brigade. So a brigadier, brigade commander, brigadier general, 1 star. Next rank, the 2-star general, is a major general. And then if you see 3 stars, that is a lieutenant general. To give you an example, General Grant was a lieutenant general. Anything above that, 4 stars, was simply called a general. But all of these ranks, if you had a star, you were either addressed as general or by that particular specific designation, brigadier, major general, lieutenant general. So these are the Federal Army ranks. And we're about out of time for part 1 of today. We finished covering the federal officer side of things. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is just a taste of the overall decryption of uniform symbology from the Civil War. Please tune in for part 2, and we'll continue on. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for tuning in.